Announcing the commencement of the first purge.
I want you to change the world, and don't think that this is going to happen peacefully or you can do it alone. We need to kill the rich. You get out there, you use your weapons, and you rip Washington apart. You hunt down the billionaires, the bank bosses, the CEOs, the scumbags and the liars, the governors, the lobbyists, the senators, because they're all the same, and you hang them.
Just remember all the good the purge does.
Good morning, everyone. It is July 17th, 2018. I've tried making this video a few times since 6 o'clock this morning. Keep getting tongue-tied for some reason. Treasonous deep state actors will begin flipping or suiciding out of fear. And, of course, I'm going to cover this article as well and tie them together. If they come for your guns, is it your responsibility to resist? So, there's a group of people out there, a sizable group of people, who believe that some force of good guys is working with President Trump to take down the deep state. Now, of course, I can't answer that question accurately because of the lack of information, but we can get a pretty good idea of whether this is happening or not. So, this comes from Captain David Bertrand, retired. He says, the panic by the deep state and the crumbs of intel trailing behind them is all part of the plan, which QAnon posts. It's a 4D chess game played by the best. A handful of military generals advising President Trump at every move while Trump maneuvers the pieces of deception and disinformation in order to cause the criminals to screw up. The swamp creatures are being exposed, and the trap are the lies and deception now on record and will be used at the appropriate time when the perp walk begins. Q post, we have it all. The time will come when we finally know why there was a timeline set and how certain players we thought were bad guys finally expose and or cause the exposure of the plan. However, at the same time, certain treasonous types are flipping and or will flip to protect their own asses. The deep state are tripping over each other, and they're not sure who will flip or who among them they can trust anymore. No, to assure their criminal counterparts they're still in control, the most dangerous and treasonous of them all are the same ones that speak the loudest with the help of their CIA Mockingbird fake media and book tours. The two golden eggs, the prize of prizes, are both Obama and Hillary Clinton. The rest of them are in fear. Suicides and arkancides are nearing. Candidate Trump, during a debate with Hillary Clinton, responded to her snide comment of what America would look like under a Trump presidency, he responded, "Because you will be in jail." QAnon has confirmed in many posts of how the game is being played, and it is known that deep state operatives and targets are reading Q posts and forces them to make a counter move of which they may or may not know the outcome of that move. And they say chess. The complexity of this game by the good guys is reaching the boiling point, and testimonies for public consumption are just the trailer to a well-planned movie with a tremendous ending that nobody could ever imagine. Well, the problem is, Mr. Captain Bertrand, this isn't a fucking movie. And in this reality, the super rich have access to all kinds of weapons and people. I've talked a lot about the idea of these people, if they get desperate enough, will pull a major false flag. One that eliminates electricity for most of the country to get rid of all the evidence that is being housed on the various NSA servers around the country. Without electricity, without these servers, the proof cannot be accessed. And let's be honest, the NSA, among others, have the evidence, all of the evidence they need to put the Clintons and the Obamas, among others, behind bars. But because they are part of the ruling class, they will not be put behind bars. This is a fantasy. My comment is as follows for this particular article. You are living fantasies if you really believe the deep state is in some sort of panic mode. FEMA, the deep state's favorite mass murder squad, just ordered 5,000 gallons of hydrogen cyanide, nice new smart guillotines, and a shitload of replacement blades. You want to believe some good guy heroes are going to swoop in and save the day, but there are no heroes and very few good guys. You want to believe that somehow the right is better than the left, but they too are morally bankrupt, corrupt tyrants hiding behind a veil of Christianity. The state bows to the whims of the deep state, and the pathetic, sycophantic masses believe their enforcement class is there to serve and protect their stupid little communities with stupid little people doing, thinking, saying stupid, meaningless things. The truth is, the enforcement class is there to enforce the dictates of both the both the state and the deep state, and the stupid little people see obeying these whims as virtuous, but really it is enslavement. Really it is weak. Really it is pathetic. You really have done a great job of keeping, they really have done a great job of keeping people in the mindset of children, making you just smart enough to do your job, but have dumbed you down to such an extent that you love your enslavement, you love your masters, you love those who enforce their inhumane, corrupt policies. And all of you who support these people are just as guilty of the various crimes committed by the state and deep state and their enforcement class. And you are. You're just as guilty. Now, we know that there's an agenda for the United Nations, the Marxists, the left, and the right to take your guns. The question is it your responsibility to resist when they come for your guns? The short answer is, of course, it's your responsibility. So, I made you all aware that the U.S. recently agreed to fully implement the United Nations Gun Control Pact. We've talked about this over and over again. And I had been talking about it for about 5 years. Of course, my other channel's gone now, but nonetheless, this has been a subject that I've talked about, and I'm talking about it some more because our guns are our last line of defense against these usurpers, these criminals, these murderers. Even if your country never completely bows to the rule of the United Nations, it is clear that there is an agenda in play to disarm Americans. They are looking for any excuse they can come up with from you owning a gun, or to keep you from owning a gun. I have mentioned a few times Chicago. I really think Chicago, Atlanta, Baltimore, they are going to be the stepping stones to get the United Nations patrolling those locations. You might recall Condoleezza Rice signed a Smart Cities Pact with the United Nations to do just that. There was an example I was going to give you, but I don't recall which site it was on. Chicago, Baltimore, Atlanta. Now, each of these places has a lot of gun violence, particularly black on black gun violence. This is not going to be the reason the United Nations is going to patrol the street. The reason that's going to be given is the police are killing these people, and they are going to try to replace your local police department with the United Nations as a result. Maybe not replace, but perhaps they will oversee your local police departments. But nonetheless, they will be there. Okay? So the reason why they want our guns so bad is the government feels threatened because there are more guns in the United States than people. And they are struggling to maintain their power over the masses, according to the author of this article anyway, Dean Garrison, by the way. Make no mistake, America, your government is waiting for the right time and set of circumstances to take your firearms. The right time and set of circumstances will go something like this. Chicago, Baltimore, Atlanta. One of these places will have a record number of people gunned down there in the streets, and police will have a strong involvement in that number, and the outrage caused by the police murdering these people will get the UN's foot in the door. And after they're here, after they start patrolling the streets, there's only going to be one way to get rid of them. This author says, I feel tremendous responsibility to write this article, though I am a little apprehensive. Thinking about the possibilities of rising up against our own government is a frightening thing for many of us. Why is it so frightening? I mean, don't you think the alternative is much, much, much more frightening? I do. I'm not John Rambo, and I will be the first to admit that I do not want to die. See, everyone wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die. Don't be afraid of death. The reason I feel compelled to write this, however, is simply because I don't think the average American is equipped with the facts. Well, that's because the average American does not give a fuck about facts. I feel that a lot of American citizens feel like they have no choice but to surrender their guns if the government comes for them. I blame mainstream media sources for this mass brainwash, and I carry the responsibility of all small, independent liberty writers to tell the truth. So my focus today is to lay out your constitutional rights as an American and let you decide what to do with those rights. The Constitution does not apply to you, has not applied to the citizens since your federal government incorporated. About a month ago, I let the democracy word slip in a discussion with a fellow blogger. I know better. Americans have been conditioned to use this term. It's not an accurate term, and it never has been a correct term to describe our form of government. And he points out that we are a constitutional republic. And I've demonstrated many times that A constitutional republic is no better than a democracy. And the reason is the corrupt politicians. Now, in theory, it is a better form of government, but in practice, not so much so. He says the truth is that the United States of America is a constitutional republic. This is similar to a democracy because our representatives are selected by democratic elections, but ultimately our representatives are required to work within the framework of our Constitution. But they don't, and haven't, for a very long time. In other words, even if 90% of Americans want something that goes against our founding principles, they have no right to call for a violation of constitutional rights, but they do. All the time. Every day in the news media, every day on the floors of the Senate and Congress, they do call for the violation of constitutional rights and actually violate them every day. Not just constitutional rights, but your human rights as well. If you are religious, you might choose to think of it this way. Say that members of your congregation decide that mass fornication is a good thing. Do they have a right to change the teachings of your God? The truth is the truth. It doesn't matter how many people try to stray from it. Did I just compare our founders to God? In a way, he did. He says he's not trying to insult anyone. For the purpose of the American government, our Constitution and the founders who wrote it are much like God is to believers. It is the law. It is indisputable, and I disagree with that. It is disputable. Our founding fathers did not want democracy, for they feared a true democracy was just as dangerous as a monarchy. They were highly educated people who were experienced in defending themselves against tyranny. And that's bullshit too. They were not. They may have been highly educated. They understood that the Constitution could protect the people by limiting the power of anyone to work outside of it, much better than a pure system of popularity. Now, were they right about that? How has the Constitution protected us? How has it limited the power of the government? Please do let me know. Let me know exactly how it is that this document, this piece of paper, this idea has protected us throughout the history of our country. I don't see it. A system of checks and balances was set up to help limit corruption of government and also the potential for an immoral majority developing within the American populace. We have forgotten in this country that we are ultimately ruled by a constitution, and we're not. We have not been. The politicians have not been ruled by the Constitution for at least the last 100 years. At least. Why is a democracy potentially just as dangerous as a monarchy? And we already know it's two wolves voting for what, and a sheep voting for what's for dinner. Even 240 plus years ago, our founders were perceptive enough to realize that democracy was a dangerous form of government. And the reason is because citizens can be just as corrupt as any government, and we are. And we've seen evidence of this throughout history. Ask Native Americans and African Americans if this population can become corrupt. We already know it has been corrupt, along with the politicians, along with the police, for decades. He says, I think in 2018 we are seeing evidence of what our founders were trying to tell us. Just because a majority of people may support certain ideas, it does not mean that those ideas are just. You know, like forcing people to use pronouns that they disagree with to describe an individual who wishes to be called a woman when they are a man. Okay, I think in 2018 we are seeing evidence that our founders were trying to tell us. Just because a majority of people may support certain ideas, it doesn't mean that those ideas are just. In simple terms, just because most Americans love our president and voted for him, it does not mean that he has the power to go against our constitutional rights. Of course he does. They all do. Next, I'd like to review the text of the Second Amendment. It is very clear that this is the law of the land. So when Senate liberals or fake conservatives talk about taking your guns, you need to think about something. Are they honoring their sworn oath to uphold the Constitution? Of course not. So, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, and the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Note, the Second Amendment says absolutely nothing. It does not add any conditions. It doesn't say shall not be infringed unless you are black. Shall not be infringed unless you are a criminal. Shall not be infringed unless you've been charged with a crime. Shall not be infringed if you are X, Y, or Z. Has no such provisions. That's why everyone who is in prison for possession of a firearm should be freed. This is a pretty clear statement. The fact is that it took 232 years for the Supreme Court to even rule on this amendment because it has never been successfully challenged. In 2008, a case of Columbia versus Heller, the Supreme Court ruled that a handgun ban in Washington, D.C. was unconstitutional. One also has to take this into consideration. The Supreme Court supports your right to own guns. For those who try to debate the spirit of the Second Amendment, there are truly no different from people who will try to make or take a biblical quote out of context to bring or to try to support their immoral decisions. The founders were very clear on the intent of the Second Amendment. And the biggest reason why we have a right to keep and bear arms isn't because some government asshole said we had these rights. It's because the right to self-defense is a natural, God-given right. It cannot be taken by the state. Cannot be, at least not legitimately, taken away from any individual. So, firearms stand next in importance to the Constitution itself. No, they don't. They don't stand next in importance. They are more important than the Constitution. The Constitution is a piece of paper with a bunch of fancy words written on it. It is constantly being broke. The law to govern the government is constantly being broke by the government. So, in reality, the guns are far, far more important than the Constitution. Because, after all, they are the things that make it possible to resist. They are the American people's liberty teeth and keystone under independence. From the hour the Pilgrims landed to the present day, events, occurrences, and tendencies prove that to ensure peace, security, and happiness, the rifle and pistol are equally indispensable. The very atmosphere of firearms everywhere restrains evil interference. They deserve a plan, or they deserve a place of honor with all that is good. That came from George Washington. The Constitution shall never be construed to prevent the people of the United States who are peaceable citizens from keeping their own arms. Sam Adams. And of course, hundreds of quotes like this can be found. This country was built on the right to bear arms. It was built on the rights of an individual to bear arms, regardless of what his government or neighbor happens to think. This is crystal clear. Ironically, the people who voice their opinions against this right have their free speech protected by your guns. Without guns in this country, all other amendments becomes null and void simply because we the people will lose our power of enforcement. We need to keep this in mind as our representatives try to push gun bans. I don't care if 99% of the people are in support of gun bans, which is far from the case. It is a violation of our constitutional rights, plain and simple. No, it's not only a violation of our constitutional rights, it is a violation of our God-given right to self-defense. A constitutional republic protects the rights of the individual even when their ideas are very much in the minority. If I were the only person in America who believed in the Second Amendment, I would still be within my rights to call upon it. You would all think I was insane and possibly celebrate if I was gunned down, but in the end I would be the only true American among us. Our framers were very clear on this. If my government comes to take my guns, they are violating one of my constitutional rights that is covered by the Second Amendment. It is not my right at that point, but my responsibility to respond in the manner of, or in the name of liberty. What I am telling you is something that many are trying to soft sell, and many others have tried to avoid putting it into print, but I'm going to say it. The time for speaking in code is over. If they come for your guns, then it is your constitutional right to put them 6 feet under. You have a right to kill any representative of this government who tries to tread on your liberty. I am thinking about self-defense and not talking about incitement, a revolution, or inciting a revolution. Reread Jefferson's quote. He talks about a last resort. I'm not trying to start a revolt. I am talking about self-defense. If the day for revolution comes, when no peaceful options exist, we may have to talk about that as well. None of us wants to think about that. But please understand that a corrupt majority cannot take away your rights as an American citizen. Only you can choose to give your rights up. Congress could pass a gun ban legislation by a 90% margin, and it just would not matter. I think some people are very unclear on this. This is the reason we have a Supreme Court, and though I do not doubt that the Supreme Court can also become corrupt, in 2008 they got it right. They supported the Constitution. It does not matter what the majority supports because America is not a democracy. A constitutional republic protects the rights of every single citizen, no matter what their elected servants say. A majority in America only matters when the Constitution is not in play. I just wrote that every believer in the Constitution wants to say, or what every believer in the Constitution wants to say, and what every constitutional blogger needs to write. The truth of the matter is that this type of speech is viewed as dangerous and radical, subversive, and it could gain me a world of trouble that I do not want. It is also the truth. To make myself clear, I will tell you again. If they come for your guns, it is your right to use those guns against them and to kill them. You are protected by our Constitution. I'm going to end that right now and tell you that you are not protected by the Constitution. You are protected by your rifle. You are protected by your shotgun. You are protected by your handgun. But you are not protected by the Constitution. You are not protected by the government, the police, or any of these things. The only thing that is protecting you is a gun. So, this one's gone a bit long. But when they come for your guns, it is your responsibility to resist. It is not the responsibility of some made-up good guys to protect you. It's your responsibility. Anyway, thought I'd talk to y'all about this. I hope you all have a good day. Remember, kill the state before the state kills you.